Hello and welcome to another book synopsis with Unjustified. My name is Kim and I will be your host. To clarify a few things before we get started, I do not read the books word for word. I do change the words to my own. However, if it is direct quotes or direct legal wording and verbiage, those things I will not change. Even after you finish listening to my synopsis of this book, I highly recommend and encourage you to go purchase the book itself. In no way is my synopsis going to ever hold justice to the actual author's words. I will always leave a link in the description box below where you can purchase the book. Also, my book synopsises are not documentaries. They are not videos nor photos. These are basically like a podcast or an audible. So without further ado, let's get into this book. This book synopsis is a bit different from the others that I have done. This book is supposedly written by Cindy Watts and it is titled All My Broken Pieces. However, speaking with Cindy and asking her why this book never actually made it into publication and there is only 6 chapters to this book, I was told that the author was adding to the book way more than Cindy was comfortable with. So that said, Cindy completely dropped out and she never completed this book. She also says that she has absolutely no desire and no intention whatsoever to ever complete the writing of this book. All of My Broken Pieces. Please note, in the book, Jamie Watts is written under the alias name of Sarah. And now to the foreword. I don't think even once, not when I was a little girl even, that I expected or wanted everyone in our country to know my name. Maybe every little girl dreams of being a princess and now an internet star. But they didn't have internet stars when I was a kid, and they don't have any princesses or stars at all. Where I've always lived, the only stars and princesses are those in the sky. If anyone had been interested or asked me 10 years ago what I wanted, I would have told them that I already had it. A good marriage to a fine man and 2 wonderful children. And by back then, I have to let you know and say that I mean back before my son was married to a woman that was wrong for him. And he began to lose himself. And we began to lose him as well. Our pain started then, and over the next 8 years, our lives tilted downhill and became sadder and more complicated and filled with growing amounts of unwanted drama and fear, until we finally ended up here at the bottom in a damaged, grieving heap, broken into pieces. 2 of our granddaughters are dead, and the young woman who was our daughter-in-law is dead. Her family is devastated as well. Our boy is in very many ways as lost to us as though he were dead. Our family is in a rubble, and the whole world seems to know our names and hate us. We just exist and try to breathe through permanently constricted throats, trying to find a way, any way at all, to go on living for what time we have left, and for who we have left, including each other, in our new reality, which is simply moment-by-moment wreckage. I am not writing this book to ask for sympathy. I am writing it because there are always 3 sides to every story. Hers, his, and the truth. And I do not know that truth any more than all of the millions of strangers worldwide who seem to think they do. But I know some things, and I know our family. I know my son, or maybe I don't, and I wish to gain some understanding of him and his actions through this process. And to a degree, I know the story of the marriage that led us all here, and I want to tell people about these things that I know at least. As to what I hope will come of this, well, I don't hope for much anymore. But no matter what you think of me or us, remember this. Chris is still my child, and if you have ever had and love children, then you wish to hold them and comfort them when they are damaged. You wish to try to make it right. Well, I can't make this right, and I may never even get to hug my son again. I'll never be able to comfort him. Now, I can tell my story, though, or my truth, if you will, and hope for some understanding. This is the story of us before, during, and after the slide. It is the story of our son meeting and marrying Shanann and what occurred during their marriage. It's the story of our granddaughters as we knew them, and our son's life during those years and even the aftermath. This is about us, just a group of ordinary people that we actually are, and not as those who think they know us or might wish us to be. Because if what they say of us were true, then something like this could never happen to you or someone you love. And that reassurance, I cannot give to anyone anymore. As painful as the words of the strangers are, those who know nothing of us, but feel they do, I hold no grudges. I might have thought the same as they do before, when it wasn't us. And before means before my family became one of those people that you only read about. And they shake their heads over, and then they'll immediately run to their laptops and say things to us like, quote, "I guess I would have drowned him at birth," end quote. And if that wasn't personal enough, they speculate about whether it was me or my husband Ronnie, who is a psychopath, and whose horrible parenting, or genetics, take your pick or choose both, has twisted up our boy so bad that he was always destined to grow up to become a family annihilator. And the worst, of course, the very worst, and I think what truly drove this book, is the people who have written that my beautiful young grandson is going to grow up to be another Chris. So God help you all to find more kindness, and maybe to find in these pages the answer that there aren't any real answers. And what I mean is there is no answers as to how this tragedy happened or what could have stopped it, because you can't see that. Because can't you see that if we could have, we would have? Please, if nothing else, believe that. And I would like to thank you, the reader, for listening to my story and for giving me your time as I travel this road again. Chris was a really good kid. It's not just me who says so either. Everyone who ever met and knew him said so too. He was very gentle and quiet, and he never caused us one single problem. He was an honor student. He loved sports, and he made a nice life for himself in Mooresville, North Carolina, after high school, and then NASCAR tech. And then he met Shanann. Chapter 1. Everybody talks about their dreams for their children, but I think I can safely say that there is only one that we parents have. We just want them to be happy. And of course, there is no bigger dream, and in many cases, nothing harder to achieve. And the difficult thing is that we really can't do one thing about helping them to be happy. That's mostly down to luck, I think. And our son's luck ran out pretty early on. I don't think I worried about him as much when he was little. He was such a good kid. And in high school, he played baseball and he got straight A's. So I didn't have any reason to worry, but I did anyway, because he was so incredibly shy and quiet. I didn't want him to be lonely or missing out on all of the silly adventures. These silly adventures is something that we as parents sometimes complain about, but we expect them anyway, and then later on we'll just shake our heads over it and laugh. But Chris was terribly serious at an age when most kids aren't. Our daughter was so busy and overscheduled with friends and boyfriends and keeping AT&T in business and pushing our rules that it was hard not to notice the differences between them as teenagers. Still, what more could I have reasonably wanted than a son who did all the right things and just seemed to enjoy going to see NASCAR races with his dad while maintaining high grades and playing sport? And yet, okay, I'd hear from my mother, who the kids called Oma, about the school pickups. See, I was working, and so she would go and pick the kids up for me after school. She would drive up to get Chris first at his elementary school, and promptly out would come Chris, running out the door, giving her his quiet smile and saying thank you as he got in the car to wait for his sister. And wait they did. Sarah was so popular that it could take her a good half an hour or more after school to say goodbye to all of her friends that she wouldn't get a chance to talk to by phone for an hour or so. It used to drive my mom crazy. Both of my kids were born kind. It's just that Sarah never met a stranger in her life. And Chris, well, he liked people just fine, but he came out very reserved and quiet, just like his dad, and he stayed that way. Now, he had a few close friends, and I guess if I wondered how it would go for him later on, and, well, I did, because I'm his mother, I hoped that somewhere out there ahead of him, there was a sweet girl who would think like I had about Ronnie and value him for what he was. She would, that I had hoped, simply enjoy being with my sweet, good, and hard-working boy and build a life with him. Now, while Sarah and I knew that she could have her pick and pick right when she was ready, and she did. She went to college, fell in love with Steve, married him, and started her career and her living happily ever after in the usual small starter home. But with Chris, I didn't know so much as just to hope for the best. He was so shy, in fact, that a girl had to ask him to go to the senior prom. So I think, if I can remember correctly, I guess I knew that he would have to meet a pretty outgoing girl to bring him out of his shell. That when he did, that he'd be completely devoted to her and try his very best to make her happy. And since he is so much like his dad, I figured her chances for that were better than average. After high school, Chris, who, like his dad, could fix anything mechanical that had been invented, had set his sights on the NASCAR Academy, and so off he went at 18, and after he completed his schooling there, he was hired by a Ford dealership in Monroeville. He's always been a hard worker, and he liked the work too. And we had raised both of our kids to be very careful about money. And for a while there, it did seem like that he had learned it too, because he started right off by saving up about every cent that didn't go to rent and food. And before too long, he had bought a brand new car, a Ford Mustang, and he only owed $8,000 on it. He was still managing to put another $11,000 into savings, which is pretty good for a young man of 24. Ronnie and I are careful people, so nothing about Chris's finances surprised us then. When Chris had spare time, he continued his lifelong enjoyment of exercise and being outside and coming down to visit us and his sister and our new family member, Sarah's little boy, Wyatt. And of course, he took every opportunity to go see NASCAR with his dad. And I was glad of that too. I love Ronnie, but those races are too loud for me, and I don't think I was missed. Those two loved hanging out together. Our family stayed close, and we saw a lot of Chris despite the 3-hour drive from Monroeville to Spring Lake. He and Wyatt had become best friends too, and Uncle Chris was always his favorite visitor. And Sarah and Steve were expecting their second baby, which we were all overjoyed about. I think we were all happy in that simple way of being so without even noticing it really. I guess by that what I mean is things were just on track. Our kids were doing well, and their entries into adulthood had almost been a paint-by-number deal. School, jobs, marriage, and a baby for our oldest, and Chris was so young that we weren't at all concerned that he hadn't met anyone special yet. And then we got a call from Chris, and he said that he had, in fact, met a girl, and she was special, and he wanted us to meet her too. Sarah, who is by far the most outgoing member of our family, decided to host a barbecue. Nothing big, just a casual little thing. A few of the friends and some family. We weren't nervous exactly, but we were a little surprised because Chris had timidly announced to us that his new girlfriend was 40. And since he was only 24, well, I can't say what I thought, but I was definitely curious though. When Chris arrived, it was with a young, pretty, dark-haired woman. Her name was Shanann King, and she didn't look anywhere near 40. Ronnie didn't seem to be bothered by it, but Sarah and I did a little whispering in the kitchen, wondering why Chris had told us that she was so much older than she obviously was. Finally, we asked him, and he grinned and brought Shanann over, and they laughed and said it had been her idea, and wasn't it just hilarious? We laughed too, but to this day I have never figured out why she wanted us to think that she was so much older. Still, Chris seemed to like her a lot, and she was very friendly and outgoing, so we weren't worried. I suppose we were just happy that he had found someone that he liked enough to want to introduce us to, and she seemed to have a lot going for her. An extraordinary amount of things, actually. She was, as it turned out, only a year older than Chris, and she was pretty and very outgoing, which probably was an excellent thing. Seeing that Chris was so shy, she could bring him out of his shell, is what I was guessing, hoping. It's what I thought anyway. Now remember, please, I'm trying very hard to look back as honestly as I can. All of us have to keep doing that to remember how it was, not how it became, if we're going to even attempt this story. Now, Shanann was pretty, and she was funny, and in the beginning, it seemed like she wanted all of us to be friends and to get to know each other, and, well, all of those normal things. Also, we are a family that believes in hard work and trying to do the best that you can. And when we met her, she was driving a Cadillac Escalade from the company that she said she worked for, Dirty South. And then there was her house. Now, a lot of money and big houses don't mean anything to me personally. I don't want to live anywhere but in our little 1,100 square foot house until the day that I die. But I know those things are important to a lot of people, and that's fine. Hard work, whether it's for your own personal satisfaction as well as putting a roof over your head, no matter how small or large, seems to me to make people feel good about themselves. And the roof Shanann had put over her head with her hard work was a big one. In fact, it looked like a mansion. It was, as Sarah had mentioned to me, the biggest and the grandest house that she had ever seen then or even now. It had 3 formal living rooms, for heaven's sakes, and each one of them, well, every room, had the most beautiful furniture that I had ever seen in every one of them. And it sat right beside a lake, and there was a boathouse too. For the people who lived in that subdivision, I'm guessing that a boat wasn't out of question. Her bedroom was massive and beautiful. She had these little clocks and things that she said that she had ordered from Switzerland. It was perfect, like a castle. And she said that she had bought and paid for it from her job at Dirty South by the age of 25. She told me, in fact, that when she had approached the builders and told them what she wanted, they didn't take her a bit seriously until she opened up her suitcase and she had brought and pulled out $20,000 in cash. And you had to be impressed with that no matter what. I saw years later that her brother Frankie said that she was always a hard worker and was even making $500,000 a year. And to maintain a house like that, I think you would have to be putting that in it. Chapter 3. Like every other family, when their adult child falls in love, it wasn't going to matter what we thought about their kid's new love interest. What would matter is what we said, which if you ever want to have a continuing relationship with your child, that better be nothing at all. And so that's what we did. I mean, who knows? People on the internet call me a crazy possessive mother. And Chris seemed to allude to that a little bit in his first interview. My mom was a little hesitant. And the detective jumped in and said, yeah, losing her baby and all. And Chris shrugged and smiled. I have to admit, I was a little taken aback by his answer, because this was just a few weeks after Shanann had written about me on Facebook. And believe me, she had written a lot, saying, amongst other things, that Sarah was, quote, the golden child, end quote, and that Chris was always second. Sometimes you really can't win. The simple truth is that I have always been crazy about both of our kids, and so is Ronnie. But yes, I have been extremely close to my daughter, who is an astounding young woman, and who, with our beloved and very nice son-in-law, generously shares time with their children and themselves with us. That doesn't mean I love her more. We just had more in common. For example, we like to talk to each other. Something Chris and Ronnie definitely had in common was that they did not have much to say and talk about when we're together. Not that you can talk anyway at drag races or NASCAR unless you like to speak with bullhorns. Ronnie's closeness to Chris does not mean that he loved him more than Sarah. These are just untrue things, and they are hurtful from anyone. There's a good old-fashioned poem about this that I guess everyone could agree on. A daughter is a daughter all of your life. A son is a son until he takes a wife. It just means really that you pretty much have to understand and accept that once your kids grow up and marry, that things will be different, and that if you want to see them and to keep peace, you need to like their choices whether you do or not, especially if you have grandchildren. I got lucky with Sarah's and Steve. Not so lucky with Chris's choice, but I figured it didn't have to be a disaster. We could be polite and friendly, and if so, maybe Ronnie and I would get every other Christmas with them, and that's really the best any grandparents can hope for. So getting back to then, Chris was obviously in love. We were keeping quiet and going on with our lives, and a few weeks later, Chris called us to tell us that he had just bought an engagement ring for Shanann, one that they had picked out together, and before I could even say congratulations, he went on to tell me that he had paid $12,000 for this ring. And I have to say, I was shocked. $12,000 is a down payment on a house. Or he could have paid off his car. Or it was $1,000 more than he had in his life savings. And besides, he was an auto mechanic. Not Prince William or Donald Trump. Maybe what I just said will make people laugh at me, because maybe that's not a lot of money to other people, but it is to our family. And I said, son, you know money doesn't grow on trees. Couldn't you have found something nice for less money? He didn't say anything. And I think I handed the phone over to Ronnie. But I found out later that he had told Shanann what I'd said, and she was very, very angry about it. And I was sorry to hear that because I'd been trying really hard to maintain a relationship with her during this time. And she had that habit of saying confiding things to me. And like I said, I'm not used to someone I don't know being that open. Or maybe the problem from my standpoint was that all of her confidences to me were about how sort of pathetic she found my son. If possible, I suppose that she blamed him for his shortcomings, and she hoped that by telling me how he couldn't even wash dishes or cook right, or the way he dressed embarrassed her, and she didn't like his hair or his weight either. He was too skinny, she said. That we could maybe collaborate on improving him together and becoming closer. I didn't like it though, and I know it showed. But now she was going to become our daughter-in-law, and that meant that if Chris didn't mind her criticism, then I better stop minding it for him. We had made a new start, a reset, and it would begin at the beach house that Sarah and Steve had already rented for a coming stay, a family week. Chris had already been invited, and we knew that he was bringing Shanann even before the ring announcement. The plan was for all of us to spend time together and enjoy each other and witness the formal proposal that she wanted him to make with the ring. Shanann managed to find a nearby beach house on the same street as the one that our family was in. She found this beach house for her family to stay in, and this sounded like a good chance for us to start getting to know our future in-laws better, and we could all become good friends before the wedding. Everything went okay at first. We were all happy to be on the beach. Chris and Shanann in particular loved being outside all day, and they really were a beautiful couple, and they seemed to be so in love and happy, and the Ruzeks were delighted with our boy, and well, yeah, it seemed like this may end up well after all. Sarah, Steve, and Wyatt and our brand new granddaughter were there and having a great time also. The sun was shining, and at least from my perspective, our little Wyatt was liking to have the sun around all the time. He's such a happy and handsome little guy, always ready for an adventure. And for Wyatt, having Uncle Chris around was as good as Christmas. Chris was uncle and his good buddy all rolled up into one. He played with him and looked like he was having as much fun doing it as Wyatt. Little kids do know the difference between someone who really enjoys their company and someone who is doing it for show. Though I'll admit, they'll take the latter if the former isn't available. After all, it's better than not having any attention at all. Kids aren't stupid. So Wyatt didn't even want to eat breakfast first thing in the morning, not without including his pal, Uncle Chris. He'd march right to the bedroom that Chris and Shanann were staying in, and he would knock and holler good morning to hopefully wake up Chris so that he didn't miss any part of the fun. I guess like all adoring grandmas, I am definitely one of those. I thought it was adorable. We all did. Well, not all of us apparently. The second morning that it happened, Chris found me in the kitchen and asked me to keep Wyatt from knocking on their door. I was surprised and I asked him why. And he said Shanann did not like it and it was ruining her morning sleep. I was annoyed and I told him that he could tell his sister that himself, and if he wanted it to stop, and that he knew how much Wyatt loved him and that this would hurt his feelings. What was the big deal anyway? It wasn't that early. Chris looked a little embarrassed and he shrugged and said, well, it is her vacation too, I guess. Anyway, that was the end of it as far as I knew. But something else happened that week, which was way much worse, but our family doesn't discuss it. And it wasn't between me and Shanann, and Chris didn't hear about it. The proposal happened during the week as well. Chris and Shanann went down to the beach with the photographer that she had hired, and Chris popped a question, and she said yes, and then they posed for pictures. Later on, they showed us these pictures. They were in their swimsuits, and they looked young and beautiful, and Chris was still very slimmed and muscular then, and so was she. And everybody got a little choked up that there was going to be a wedding. And then we all went home. And while I wouldn't have said it had gone smoothly, I decided to try and not think about it anymore and just get on with things. Then I received an email from Shanann that shocked me completely. The gist of it was that she wanted me to know that she did not like me one bit. She thought I was a bad influence and a bad mother to Chris. She said that she knew I did not like her either, and the less we saw of each other, the better. I'd never said an unkind word to her. I felt like I've bent over backwards to welcome her into our family. And I also thought, wrongly, obviously, that I had hidden my doubts about her. It would be a lie to say I wasn't completely devastated by that email. In my whole life, no one had ever said anything like that to me. Like Chris, I'm shy. I don't get into arguments with people or raise my voice. I cried and I showed it to Ronnie, and he told me not to answer it and to just forget about it. Now, my husband really can do things like that. I didn't take his advice. I wish I had now, because what does any of it matter anymore? It did then, and then is what I'm having to remember now. I wrote her back and I told her how badly that she had hurt my feelings. I told her that whether it looked like it or not, that I was trying. And I told her that I didn't like the way she talked about my son or how she acted with my grandson, that at least I was making an effort. Then I think I told her that I wouldn't have ever written an email like this if I hadn't gotten hers. And it all seems so stupid and petty now. And it was then, ugly and petty and as sorry a beginning as a family trying to blend could have. I didn't say anything to Chris, though, because they had just gotten engaged, and I would have upset him, and Ronnie said not to, and he was probably right. I don't know what I thought would happen, but what I wanted to happen was for it to go away, and not ever have her or anyone really be as mean to me as that again, or make me lose my temper as I had. I couldn't deal with things like this, and up until then, I'd never had to. I decided to turn the other cheek and try harder. This, as it happens, was not a very good plan either. Chapter 4. Sarah was upset a week at the beach and concerned that Shanann blamed any fallout on me. But she's not a young woman who likes problems or conflicts, and she very definitely has her own life and a demanding job. So she just wanted to ignore any problems and family drama, and she advised me to do the same. That sounded good, so I decided to take her advice, and together we offered to throw a bridal shower for Shanann. Now, it had been pretty obvious from the pic of the $12,000 ring and the public engagement that Shanann was going to want a big wedding. She said she had never had one with her first marriage, and there are loads of women who want that fairy tale day. So we didn't think it was strange. Sarah had gotten married right out of college, and we actually went into debt to give her a very nice wedding. And like a lot of young marriages, it hadn't lasted but just a minute. Ronnie and I hadn't judged, though. We just shrugged it off as if we thought nothing of it. We thought of how beautiful our girl had looked on this day, and later on, when she married Steve, they just went, to a mountaintop, and they did it there. But I know every girl wants that day just one time. Sometimes I think it's even more for the wedding experience than the marriage itself. But whatever I think isn't going to put much of a dent in America's Queen for a Day wedding industry one way or the other. Anyway, it was obvious that she could afford to have any kind of wedding that she wanted. There was a house and the car, and though we didn't think her parents could pay for a big wedding, we knew that she could, so why not? Our family couldn't do anything elaborate because we simply don't have that much money. But Sarah and I both like to cook and decorate tables and make party favors and that kind of thing. So we knew we could give her a very pretty bridal shower, and then she would be happy, and that would make Chris happy. We knew that Shanann wouldn't want a small bridal shower at either Sarah or my house. So we rented a little clubhouse in Fayetteville that she had mentioned she liked. It was attached to an apartment complex, not a big space, but it was nice. Indeed, her second engagement party would be held there. We asked her for the names and addresses of all of her girlfriends, and we wrote and we sent out the invitations to them and to her family members. I was the one that mailed them, not Sarah. And a week after the invitations had gone out, the only RSVPs that we had were from members of our own family and hers. So I called Shanann up and told her that we really hadn't got any answers back from her girlfriends. So she gave me their phone numbers, and I called each and every one of them. And all of them said that they had gotten their invitations but hadn't answered yet because they each had different plans for that day and they weren't going to be able to make it. There was one exception who said that she had been planning to RSVP and she would be there. Sarah and I had worked hard on the shower, and I thought it looked beautiful, and our family and hers were there, and she got gifts and lots of attention. She was not happy. You could tell she wasn't. I just didn't realize how unhappy she was until years later when Sarah and I saw the discovery documents. Now, unfortunately, that was the end of chapter 4, and there are no other chapters of the book that I'm aware of. Cindy never finished this book, and at the end of that chapter, she said she would never complete it. So this may give some of you a little insight into her side of the story. Stay tuned for more book synopsis, and thank you so much for listening. We would truly appreciate a thumbs up or even a thumbs down if you feel so inclined. We hope you have a great day, night, or evening, wherever you may be. And until next time, this is Unjustified.